Welcome to another episode of the Reboot Chronicles, a no-holds-barred forum with global leaders, authors, entrepreneurs, and CEOs about how organizations stay focused on growth and innovation in unprecedented times. I'm your host, Dean Tobias, coming to you live from Reviv's North American headquarters in Chicago, and we would like to thank you for joining us from around the globe today. I'd like to welcome Stephanie Stuckey. She's the CEO of Stuckey's, the roadside oasis that's famous for its pecan rolls, founded by her grandfather who grew it from a simple Georgia pecan stand in the 30s to what I thought was America's favorite roadside oasis with over 350 stores set up by the 70s. But along the way, Stuckey's crazy road trip, I think it was bought out by a company called Pet Dairy in the 70s, which then led the brand into what I call a perfect storms. And things got a bit worse when the group was bought out by yet another conglomerate. And as a business historian myself, what happened next I describe as your typical corporate train wreck, as the brand fell out of favor with its owners, very common thing that happens, and began slipping into the worst thing, which is irrelevance, obscurity, and decline. But her dad reunited with the business in the 80s and rebooted the brand as a store within a store. We'll talk about that in a minute. And Stuckey started showing up again across America's highways alongside Dairy Queen, which some of you know Warren Buffett eventually got involved in. But once again, Stuckey's took a backseat on this long historical road trip. So a few years ago, our guest, Stephanie, she took the wheel with a plan to acquire Stuckey's, to bring it back from the brink and back into a third generation family hands in order to reboot it into the 21st century. So Stephanie, it doesn't sound like you sleep much. Since then, you've purchased a healthy snack company, you've undergone a whole rebranding strategy, you've added franchise stores, you've expanded B2B retail customer bases, you've increased online sales, and oh yeah, you just acquired a pecan processing and candy manufacturing plant. It's good to see you, by the way.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You know, it's been quite a journey. Just reading that, I'm kind of nostalging up a little bit here. It's like from the Great Depression to the Roaring 20s. I think that's where we are now. Who knows about roaring? But I just have one question, then we're done here. Why are you doing this?
Right. I think everybody in the world should have a rubber alligator and a coonskin cap and a pecan log roll when they go on a road trip.
And those of you that used to go to Stuckey's years ago, that's the first thing you'd see as a kid. You'd start grabbing those in the aisles and making your parents buy them.
That's why I'm doing it, just to put more happiness in the world. But seriously, for me, it is not just about selling pecan log rolls and rubber alligators. It's about the road trip experience. I just finished reading a great book. I'm a follower of other entrepreneurs who I really admire. And I just finished reading the story of Nike. And he talks in the book about Phil Knight. And he said he was not just selling sneakers, but he was selling a way of life. And his target was clearly runners, right? And so that's what Stuckey's is. We're a road trip brand. And our mission, which we decided when I took over the brand in November of 2019, is we make road trips fun. So that's what we're doing. That's why I wake up every morning at 5 a.m. and work these insane, crazy hours. And I'm doing so much because I really think America's ready to revive the road trip, and Stuckey's wants to be part of that.
Yeah, we can jump into that in a little bit. The whole 2020 lockdown pandemic there's been a resurgence in not just, road trips and travel on interstate, but also back roads, and a lot of your heritage is there.
Absolutely.
As you know, I've been on many family enterprise boards. I'm actually still on 2 right now. And as you probably, yeah, exactly. It's, careful what you say in a cocktail party. Sure, I can help. No problem.
Yeah, it's not just, it's not just, this isn't, this is business. Well, with a family, like, you're never away from it.
Right.
It's always there.
Yeah, we had the CEO of Amway on, the first non-family member in their history the other day, and he said, "You often are feeling like a psychologist, aren't you, Dean?" I'm like, "Yes, absolutely," which is fine. But as you know, less than 15% of these companies make it to the third generation. I'm on one right now that's being transferred to a third generation, which is making it just fine. But the stats are not against you. You are bucking this trend. So everybody wants to know, your history's been pretty well documented. So I thought we'd focus on the future. How are you rebooting this business?
Well, let me first comment on the family business, how you pass along to the next generation, because I have given that some thought. And our journey at Stuckey's has been slightly different in that the business
Yeah.
did fall out of family hands for decades. And like, I love the way you said corporate train wreck. I wrote that down as you were giving the intro. I want to remember that. We really were sort of this classic story of this nostalgic brand that got taken over by a corporation and trashed.
Yep.
And you've seen that time and time again. That story is played out throughout business history. What doesn't
Especially in
happen?
the conglomerate phase, last century.
Yes,
We're getting better at it as companies now, buying smaller companies. But yeah.
but I agree, and I don't want to trash that process because it has been done well, but it really has to be a good fit, and it wasn't in our case. And so we got the brand back, which never happened. So that's where our story diverges from that typical scenario of the times. And so our me becoming the head of Stuckey's was different in that I hate to say it, and I don't want to bash us other 3Gers, but the third generation is quite often the generation that screws it up. You know,
Yes,
the
we
saying,
do.
like, you've got the visionary founder, and then you've got the second generation that builds it and continues. And then the third generation, we tend to be artists and poets and musicians, and nothing wrong with that, but not necessarily pursuing business careers. And
Sometimes we call them dividend kids, but
dividend kids,
those of you that get the
yeah,
quarterly dividends.
trust fund kids, absolutely. And a lot of those stereotypes, frankly, do hold true,
Yeah.
and some of them don't. I think where we were different is that it wasn't in the family hands for most of my childhood years. And so there was never the sense of entitlement, or you're going to grow up and be the heiress to the pecan log roll of fortune. But I'll also say
It's a
something
nice title, though. I
interesting,
like it.
right? I like it. So I'm owning it. And this might be something of interest to some of your clients. And I've read a study about how middle children often make the best leaders for family businesses. And it's because we don't have the sense of entitlement. And we're often used to being the mediator and the facilitator, the coordinator.
Negotiator, and
Yes, and all those skills that,
I'm right in the middle. We've got seven, so yeah,
yeah,
security.
see, I'm number 4 or 5
It was a
kids.
survival skill for you, probably.
Yes. So I think it's, for me, I'm just grateful that I had this experience. I grew up seeing the stores decline and it broke my heart. And I always had such a strong connection with the brand because I knew my grandfather, but and so it was very personal to me. But I, like you, grew up taking those family road trips in the Woody station wagon, and being one of the younger kids, I was always thrown in the back without the air conditioning. So,
Yeah, that's where my sister Mikey went. So we had nine of us in the car, cross country trips all the time, and airplanes were invented. I don't know what happened to us, but the so we used to do these cross country trips, and we stopped. I don't know why, just about at every other Stuckey's. Not everyone, but and as kids we liked it. It was an oasis. It was a break to get away from each other. If there was no air conditioning in the cars, why I don't know. It was invented then too. So, but when I was writing your intro. And then reading it out loud, I got this little just emotional sense, of course. But what I really was thinking is, oh my gosh, you guys could have been Starbucks.
yeah, well, we could have been, but we are where we are. And that's the acceptance, like you said. And I know I got off track, but your question was,
No,
how are
it's
we
okay.
rebooting? I think the greatest American story is the comeback story.
Yep.
So if we were Starbucks, we wouldn't be this wonderful comeback brand. And you have to accept life and take it where you are. And so
Good advice.
I try not to think woulda, shoulda, coulda. You would see us on every interstate if my grandfather hadn't sold, and if it had
Yeah.
been grown the way it should have, because we were the OG of the road trip. We were on the interstate before the interstate even. We started buying up land once Eisenhower announced that he was building the interstate highway system, and my grandfather shifted his business model and went away from the back roads and the small towns and started locating where the highway was going. So we really were the original roadside retail. But we have such amazing brand value, and your story right there about taking road trips, I hear dozens of those literally every day, people contacting me with their personal Stuckey story.
I know. I've seen them. I've seen some of yours
Yeah,
on LinkedIn. Some of those of you that are on LinkedIn, you should check her out. She's got some great stories there.
that's why I'm doing what I'm doing is I think there is a place, especially now with everything going on in the world and the sense of isolation and COVID. And frankly, it's sometimes not a super happy time. And evoking that sense of adventure and fun and exploring America and getting on the road and taking a road trip, that's what I'm tapping into. So, how am I building back the company?
Yeah.
3 words: branding, branding, branding. We don't have a lot of money. I like to joke we grow at the speed of cash. But what we do have is an amazing brand. That's something that's not on the balance sheets,
Right.
but it is truly what is our most valuable commodity or a line item. It's that we have a brand that means something. And so for me to bring this company back, I have to be true to the brand.
Yeah, and
And
the investment will come. There's a lot of money out there. When you
I,
look
I'm
at
waiting for it.
when we get good coverage on this podcast, you'll be surprised. But when you look at the markets, you've got baby boomers that know and understand the brand, and then just millennials X Y Z. So just call them all the next gen ones that maybe saw a lot of you, but not it wasn't back in the heyday. So there are a lot of nostalgic brands, but um, what are you doing to kind of that connective tissue between all the generations? How's that going?
It's going great. And my background is in politics. I spent 14 years in elected office as a state representative.
My
And
my condolences. No, I'm kidding.
no, I absolutely loved it. And
No, I heard great things
running
about you
for,
down there in Georgia. Yeah, you actually
I, I had a
got
good
stuff done.
time
Yep.
and I got out of it the best way. I didn't run for reelection. So I had a good exit strategy, which is important in business as well. There's so many lessons I learned in politics that I've transferred over into how I run Stuckey's. And the key thing is know your base, know your constituency, know who your voters are. So I knew who was likely to vote for me based on my issues, my platform, my district, my geography. And so having that very clear understanding of your brand when I was running for office, my brand was me. What do I stand for? Why am I doing this? How am I making people's lives better? What problem am I solving for them? You get that down and then you understand who is your market and you focus on them. And I don't need every millennial in the world or Gen Yer to be enamored with Stuckey's. I'm not necessarily looking at much at age, although certainly the people who are going to be in the demographic of age 45 and up are going to have had a personal experience with Stuckey's in the 70s, especially when we were at our peak.
Yep.
But I'm tapping into that road trip. That's our brand, and that's timeless.
And a
And
road
so there may
trip.
be 50-year-olds who hate to road trip and 20-year-olds who absolutely love it. And so we're about people who enjoy exploring America.
Yeah, and does it have to be a real road trip? Can it be a virtual road trip or social or online or what else are you thinking
Absolutely.
about?
Absolutely. And the way we make our money now, this is like I said earlier, you have to accept the reality of where you are. We don't have 360 stores. We don't even have 100 stores. We don't even have any corporate owned stores, which also was my grandfather's model. He didn't own any stores. He had franchises and he made money from franchise fees, but he made his money really from the sale of his product. And he also got a percentage from the sale of gas, which unfortunately that deal is long gone with
Right.
Texaco.
Yeah, that was a good
But
deal.
oh my God, it was a
Smart
sweetheart
deal.
deal.
That's
It's
dividend check right there.
darn that pet dairy corporation. We
Oh
lost
yeah.
that deal, but that company is Voldemort in my household. I don't like to say their name, but
Those that
we
follow the program know. I teach a program at Kellogg, but we call them BFSs, big, fat, and slows, and they tend
yes,
to not know what to do with things. But sounds like the company's in the right hands. Did you just wake up one day and say, "I need to do this. I've thought about it, need to do it." Did you call your dad? What did he say?
Oh, Lord, no. It didn't happen like that at all. I was happy in my sustainability world. I
Yeah, you had
left
a nice life.
right? I left elected office to really focus on what had been my passion when I was in office, which is environmental issues. And
Yep.
I had an opportunity to take over a small environmental law firm. I'm an attorney. And so I was suing large corporations, representing river keepers and the Sierra Club and protecting Georgia's environment. And I got a call from the mayor of Atlanta, who was a friend of mine, and he asked me to come over and run sustainability for the city. And so I was doing that. I had established an electric vehicle program, solar, urban agriculture, composting, recycling. I was all in the sustainability space. I was also teaching as an adjunct professor at the University of Georgia School of Law. I was teaching urban climate change. And I got an email literally one day from one of my dad's former business partners, and he asked me if I wanted to buy his shares of Stuckey's. It was strictly a transaction where
Yeah.
they were looking to unload stock that, frankly, had been losing money for 5 years.
Well, you had the right
And
last name too, though. So there was a
and
little bit of
honestly,
serendipity there.
I I haven't asked, but and I don't want to know, but I don't know how many people they asked before they came to me. I'm thinking I probably wasn't their first choice. Anyone looking at the balance sheets would probably have run screaming. I mean, you said you do a lot of work with private equity. No private equity investor would touch this.
Yeah.
It was a faded brand that was losing money. My dad and all his business partners had retired about a decade earlier when they sold their main business, which was Interstate Dairy Queen Corporation, to Warren Buffett.
Right.
And so they were off retired and they left Stuckey's with literally a skeleton crew running it. We had a distribution center. We have 60-ish franchise locations, and only 20 of them were brick and mortar stores or are brick and mortar stores. And the company wasn't doing well. So I looked at the balance sheets. I negotiated down the price. I bought the company. I bought 50% of the company. And it was actually 49%. And I decided that if I was going to turn this thing around, I had to run it. And if you buy 49% of the company, you're in a pretty good position to take over as CEO. And so that's what I did. And within 6 months, I started turning a profit. And that gave my dad the confidence to sell me his shares. And so
Yeah.
I bought my dad
Nice.
in June
Yeah,
and
exactly.
had 100%. And that I brought on a business partner. So now we jointly own the company.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would have done. Yeah, you need some allies and help.
Oh, you cannot do it yourself. You just
So
can't.
so forget about the Starbucks idea, but keep it in the back of your head. There's a niche there. You guys know coffee, not just pecans. If you look out 5 years, we usually don't say 10 years on this program. What's it going to look like?
Well,
What's
let
your
me just, I know I get off on tangents sometimes, but the coffee, we are working on a Stuckey's branded coffee line. It should be coming out very, very soon. And we're
I,
working on a pecan flavored coffee that will be organic. If you find pecan flavored coffee in the stores now,
not organic?
it's got all sorts of artificial, it tastes chemically. I don't
Yeah,
think that's really, but it does not taste
that's a good word. It's
real.
awful.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we are
No,
looking at,
I'd heard you were working on that in the lab, so that's exciting.
it's going to be delicious. So just stay tuned. So that's part of our 5 year. You'll see coffee. And we are working on a strategic plan right now. But our future is in selling our product. Like I said, that's how we're driving our profit. And so even if you can't physically get in a car and go on a road trip, and even though there aren't that many locations, we are selling the idea of the road trip through our pecan based products. We started as a pecan stand on the side of the road in 1937. And to this day, we're building this brand back with the basics, the road trip and the pecan. So we bought a pecan processing plant and a pecan candy plant 6 weeks ago. We will have our new branded line out in 4 to 6 weeks. So our 5 year plan is just to sell all of our wonderful products, to make The pecan, America's favorite snack nut. It is the healthiest nut. It is America's only native snack nut, and it is absolutely delicious. Yet you're
Wow.
making a face. For those of you who can't see on the podcast, a lot of people don't realize that.
I usually
America's
say that,
native
but
nut
yeah, I
is
tried to
the
hide it.
pecan,
I just thought
not the
I didn't know
cashew,
it was the only I
pistachio,
didn't know it was the only native one. That was the face. I'm like, wow, never thought about that.
which is sustainable. It's better for the environment to, and yes, they grow almonds and pistachios in California and some other states, but the
Not
pecan
native.
is native. It's
Yeah, yeah.
indigenous to this country. It's just, there's something very special about it
Yep.
that
Uh,
makes it just tastes amazing. It wasn't brought over and it wasn't made to adapt to our environment. It thrives in our environment, and the number one state for pecan production is Georgia. So
yeah. Yeah.
our facility is in the heart of pecan country. We're getting the freshest, most delicious pecans you can get anywhere in the entire world are right where we are located. We are shelling them on site and literally taking them next door to the candy plant and processing them. And they're either being roasted and put in healthy snack nuts with amazing seasonings like teriyaki lime and barbecue. We're working on all sorts of flavorings, and just basic sea salt is amazing. And then we're putting them into our Southern confections, which are based on my grandmother's original recipe. So that's how we're going to grow the brand. And hopefully, near the tail end of that 5 year period, our vision is to have corporate owned stores that we would call Stuckey's Oasis. And it would harken back to what we had in the past, but with a really fresh forward perspective. We would sell local products. We would have an experience. We'll have photo booths. We'll have coin operated amusement machines. We'll have the best products anywhere that are fun and different. And
When you
it'll be sustainable. We'll have EV charging,
yeah. When you say coin, you mean Bitcoin or never mind. So
right?
the
I know.
I
I've been listening to all the Bitcoin
I've
news.
listened. I mean, there's a whole health and beauty wellness trend going on in this country and around the globe, and there is a ton of. I've got 3 or 4 friends that have launched food companies, everything from healthy snacks to additives, you name it, and looking at a lot of investing in the food space. So I think that whole sustainability is one thing, but having like really healthy snacks is something that the large corporations they just struggle with it. So they end up acquiring them. So do you become really more of a food brand sold through distribution and retail and online in the long run with some kind of uh, company stores, kind of like the M&M store in Times Square.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we are selling everything around this experience of taking a road trip. And that's what makes our brand different, is that we really have a story to us. I think there's something special about brands where it just evokes the memory when you taste it. And talking about healthy, the pecan has been consistently ranked as one of the healthiest nuts.
Yep.
And it's super popular in the keto diet because of its carbohydrate content. So it's not only delicious,
Antioxidants and all that stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's healthy. And I think there's, other things that we would hopefully look at as we expand, and maybe with the help of some investment: pecan oil, pecan butter, pecan bars. The sky's the limit with pecan based products. Pecan shells being used in barbecue chips to create the delicious roasted
Smoking. Yeah.
foods, meats that would have that buttery taste in them. So, and that is a thing. And just we have to be able to perfect it and expand it and have it translate into an industrial process. I'm learning the manufacturing world, which is fascinating. I have gone from clean air and clean water lawsuits and figuring out how to do solar for the city of Atlanta to manufacturing process and branding and packaging. So it's been a complete career pivot after the age of 50.
Yeah. Any lessons from your grandfather that are coming to fruition now? I think he gave you some tips on research years ago, or
Yes,
what we now call ethnography, customer
right?
research.
He was really a master at what I call shoe leather learning. Just
Mm,
go walk the streets, figure it out, observe, and do it. And big picture, I think I take that from him because I don't have a background in this, yet I'm willing to dive into it and do it. Yes, my last name's Stuckey, so I don't think any other company I would be able to run, but
I don't think you'll be rebranding the company anytime soon with a different
yeah,
name either.
right. So, but that sense of you can do it and take a risk,
Yep.
I got from him because he dropped out of law school at the University of Georgia, where I went during the Depression because they couldn't afford it. And he was farming on his family's farm when he started selling pecans on the side of the road. And he didn't know retail. He didn't know how to build stores. He didn't know how to run a business. He didn't know how to run a factory or a trucking company or a billboard company, but he did it. And he figured out marketing. One of the marketing stories I like to tell about him, and there's a ton, but he really did learn by doing. And he would obsessively track where the cars that stopped at Stuckey's were coming from. And it was not uncommon if you go to Stuckey's to see my grandfather. Back in the day, they had clipboards. Now people write
Hmm.
notes on their phones and their tablets, but he would have a clipboard and start writing down where all the cars were coming from, where were their tags, what were the state plates. And he was just obsessed with tracking where his customers were, who they were, where they were, what kind of cars were they driving? Were they family cars? Were they loaded up for a vacation? So he did meticulous research, and it was
Yep.
his research. It wasn't
Yeah.
mined from a computer. And not to say that there's not value in that, but there's something really personal and connected about being in the stores, meeting people, seeing what they look like, observing their cars. Do their
Sam
cars look
Walton.
like they've been taking a road trip? He paid attention to that stuff. Does this look like a business traveler? Is this a trucker? Is this a bus?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Who's
Yeah.
my customer? And how can I make sure they want to pull over and that I'm meeting their needs when they do?
And I know you've been doing that too, going around as a CEO. It's a lost art. Most when I talk to retail CEOs, we had some of them on the program. I always ask them, "When was the last time you hit 10 stores?" And it's something Sam Walton did. If he had never done that, he never would have understood how Sears and Montgomery Ward and J.C. Penney, all the original stores back then, were missing the mark, and how he could. He didn't know he was going to dominate the world the way they are, largest corporation in the world. But that whole walking around thing, well, it's
Yes,
back. It's back, and I think you've learned a lot just by doing that and seeing how to shift your business model. And it's not just about profitability; it's all about growth for you. You've got you're almost unencumbered with, if I don't have to run a network of stores, what else can we do? Sky's the limit.
right. Well, speaking of Sam Walton, that's another biography I recently reread. I read it many years ago when it first came out, Made in America.
Hmm.
And to your point about him constantly checking on his stores, he also was just a retail student of lifelong learning. And he talks about going all around the world, and wherever he went, he would go retailing. He would check out retail stores in Mexico, in Paris, and London, and he would be in there checking their prices and looking at their displays. And so you can say what you want about Walmart. I've heard good, bad, everything in between, but I really admire Sam Walton and how he built that business and how he had his core principles and he stuck to them and he was dedicated to being the absolute best at offering low prices. That was his niche. He
Yep,
knew his niche and he owned it. And there's just so much learning in how he built that company.
he killed it.
He
Speaking
killed
of
it.
family, businesses, just really want to join you, or thank you for joining us for on the program today. But I
Thank
just have
you.
one last question about that. What kind of advice would you give people that are listening in right now that are running family enterprise businesses? Big and small. We've had obviously some big ones on the program and some aspiring ones. And yeah, basically, you've got a very unique perspective.
I'm going to share a Phil Knight quote since that was the last book I read, Shoe Dog, and I love one of the things he said, and I wrote it down on a little index card, put it on my mirror. I look at it in the morning. It says, "Don't seek a job, a profession, or career, seek a calling. And if you seek a call, so that's where the quote ends.
Mm-hmm.
If you seek a calling, you can weather the rough times because you are passionate about what you do. And it is not easy building a brand, or actually, I think rebuilding a brand is harder because, like I said earlier, I am where I am with this company. I didn't get to put all these pieces together. This is what I got, and it's not even what I inherited. I bought this company. I'm not your typical third generation that this was handed to me, and I'm not slighting 3Gers who had it handed to them. That's the way it happens in family businesses usually.
Yeah,
But
good
I
advice.
actually put my life savings into buying this, and there are really rough days when I wake up and think, how are we going to make it? But we do, and we've been growing this company. Within 6 months, like I said, we were profitable,
Yeah,
and that's
you
what my
brought
dad,
that
you know,
next generation of energy to
yeah,
the table, and I encourage those of you that are running family businesses, or even whether you're inheriting them, or ask the question, if I made you buy the company, would you do it? That's commitment. So,
yeah,
Stephanie, some great
great,
stories here.
yeah,
We'll include some links on the podcast for people, and get a hold of you on LinkedIn. It's good to see you. Hope to see you in a Stuckey's sometime soon, and I really want to check out your pecan coffee. Sounds fantastic.
I will send you some, Dean. I'm really grateful that you gave me this opportunity to share my story, share the
Oh,
Stuckey story.
absolutely. You've been listening to Stephanie Stuckey, the CEO of Stuckey's. This is Dean Tobias with the Reboot Chronicles. Well, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you soon.